Morning. Maybe I can get all this technology stuff to work. If I can figure out where I put it. Um, I thought this would be a good time, and I see that from Sabbath school and everything else, we've been talking about God being our Father. What better role model can we as fathers have? And the older we get, the more we have to deal with kids, we get a tiny little understanding of what he must have had to deal with all these years. Think we get a better appreciation for his patience and understanding and long suffering. And, as most of y'all know, I travel a lot and teach on creation. So this is a creation talk that I had for somewhere else. But, he is our creator. He has made all this stuff for us as a father that loves his children. So I'd like to share with y'all some of the things, like I say, that I talk about when I go places. Now, I will warn y'all, this one and several other ones I do, I'm kind of all over the place on it. And I try to do that because everybody has different interest. And if you hammer on one thing, you're going to have people that are bored and might not enjoy it. So I try to have a little bit of everything for everybody. So if y'all have a question while I'm doing this, stop me and let's talk, because that's what we're here for. I hope I'm not too long-winded. But I enjoy talking about the Lord and the wonderful things that he's made for us. So, this is some of the things that, if this thing will work. Well, we done tested, and there we go. Sometimes it was taking 4 or 5 clicks to get it to go. But talk about some of the things in the world. I've got several texts. You may not can read them. I wish they were bigger, but limited by the size of the screens and stuff. But I'm sure we all know the first one, by the word of the Lord were the heavens made and all the host of them. He spake and it was done. He commanded and it stood fast. And then I've got a quote, talking about, from Miss White, talking about what the earth was like when God first made it. And she says that it's nothing today like it was back then. She said the air today in our freshest forest just smells foul compared to what it did. Our trees are tiny compared to what it was like before the flood. And I know that I've seen some things that they talk about the trees were much larger before the flood. She said the mountains were more majestic than the ones we had today. And instead of being rocky, they were covered by beautiful foliage and stuff. I think it will be a wonderful thing to see it when God remakes it. There we go. And she talks about, patriarchs and prophets, that God created man in his own image. What better thing can we be than to be made in God's image? I guarantee you we're not a very good copy of it. We've got a lot of faults. A lot of them he'll take care of whenever he comes back. But it's our responsibility to fix what we can while we're here and to show him that we want to be his children, because he wants us to be. It's just whether or not we're going to turn our back on that. There we go. So when you read in Patriarchs and Prophets, Miss White talks about, that after creation, God brought all the animals before him to name them. And, we all know the story that there was not someone found for him. And Miss White says that God made Eve because Adam could not even get the fellowship and the interaction he needed, even from the angels. He needed somebody like him. And, I've often wondered why God didn't make Eve when he made Adam. But I think that as humans, to really appreciate something, we need to know that we need it. If God had made Eve to begin with, Adam probably would have took it for granted. Sometimes we don't know what we have until we either lose it or we don't have it. And I think that was a good reason God didn't give Eve straight to Adam. There we go, it's working a little better. And, we know the story that Eve was created from a rib out of Adam, and that is to signify that she's part of man and they are to walk beside. She is to love the man even as their own self, and he is to do the same because they're from one flesh. And that's something we all need to remember in our marriages and in our kids. We should never let our anger or anything rise so much that it quenches the love. As long as you always remember the love that you have, I think it will always control the wrath. And I think that's what God does. He's gotten angry a lot of times with us, but he's held his wrath back out of mercy for us. And that's a good lesson that we can learn from God. But there are consequences sometimes. This was not really God forcing them out of the garden. This was them removing themselves from the garden. It was a consequence of their action. Now, this to me is something funny that the world is trying to turn this into a fairy tale. And I found this quote and just read it. And I started not to put it in here, but it says, according to Genesis, we all come from Adam and Eve who had 3 sons. Think about it. Take all the time you need. So they're trying to say that God only made 3 men. So how could we have, reproduced from that? So that's why evolution is true. Well, it talks about wives and all this stuff. But they try to make all these stories out of the Bibles into fairy tales. And whenever we teach them to our children, we need to guard that. We don't need to teach them as a fairy tale. We need to teach them as truth. And that's one reason I love bringing the fossils and different things like that I find to kids, because that's the actual things. And it gives them proof they can hold in their hand. And that's more impressionable to us when we can actually see it and feel it. Some different quotes from different people. One, Richard Dawkins, I'm sure y'all have heard of him. He said, nobody knows how life happened. They sure enough try to speculate a lot. And then you get down with Francis Crick. He was one of the ones involved with DNA coding and stuff. And he says, an honest man armed with all the knowledge available to us now could only state that in some sense, the origin of life appears to be a moment, to be almost a miracle. So many conditions which would have to been satisfied to get it going. Evolution does not like to believe in miracles. They can't explain it. And, you go a little bit further down and they said, the human genome is a molecule with approximately 3 billion genetic letters. They're all precisely ordered in a way that instructs the cell how to reproduce itself. We can't create things like that. We don't even know how to even start. It shows that there was a designer and a maker. So, whenever these things start falling out of place, because as we know now that sin's in the world, that perfection is not going to be here anymore. And we know that God is letting the world slowly wind down. And the same thing's happening to our bodies. So we do have mutations, which is what evolution counts on to create things. And this was some of the different quotes, of different things. It says, some mutations are harmful while others are beneficial. You think of mutations, most of the time we can't think of good mutations. So here are some other ones. You can see some of the pictures in the mutations. I've got some bigger ones. That's what builds evolution. Now here's one of the good I'll get it right in a minute. One of the mutations that say is beneficial is sickle cell anemia. Now probably anybody with sickle cell anemia says it's not beneficial. But you know what they say is beneficial? It can help keep you from getting malaria. That's the beneficial thing about it. And that's one of the number one things they bring up when we talk about beneficial mutations. We see some different mutations. As long as all the fingers work, this one would be good until you need a pair of gloves. Now, don't know. God may have made us with 6 fingers and 6 toes. We don't know. We know some of the giants, like Goliath, had 6 fingers and 6 toes. I've got a fossilized footprint they believe may have had 6 toes. One thing that we're so far from the creation, we don't know how God originally created us. So we're guessing at some things. This is an African American guy. So we can see something messed up in his code for his pigment. And you think, well, what's the big deal with that? Well, it throws off a lot of other things in your body whenever one little thing like that gets messed up. And a lot of your systems don't work right and stuff like that. Now, unlike the guy that had 6 fingers that worked, this would be a lot harder to deal with. Not saying we couldn't survive, but the world's not made for somebody with hands like that. And you have a lot of limitations. And we see different things that sin has come in. I don't know how well somebody could see like this. It would be hard. Your vision probably would never be right. This didn't really affect the function, but think of having to live with that all of your life. Imagine being a child, how much teasing and stuff you would end up with. It would be rough. You have different genetic diseases that cause so many problems that we see people have to deal with. It'll be so nice when God comes back and they can live a life and we can see what they're really like without the limitations of this sinful world on them. Imagine to live with this, knowing there's no hope of anything ever getting better. I've always told my wife and kids, when you get to feeling sorry for yourself, you don't have to look forward to see somebody in a lot worse shape than you are. I guess you'd never be alone. But imagine being stuck with somebody and not be able to get away from them too. It would take a certain personality and stuff to have to learn to live with this all your life. And then to find somebody you could marry, it would take a special situation for that too. It's real challenges that sin has brought in that we have to deal with. I don't know how well y'all can see the harmful ones on the left, but the frog's got extra legs. I'm sure he's not normal. The kitten would never be able to live a normal life. Their feet on the bottom are just so distorted. You'd never have shoes, and I'm sure they probably have a lot of pain and stuff with the way they are. Now they're saying the beneficial mutations are camouflage. I don't think that's a mutation. I think that's things God originally designed. Because random things don't make stuff like that happen. We need to look at things that there was an intelligence. Fish fossils they found, and they said because of the way his fins were positioned, he was starting to develop legs. And he had been dead, extinct for millions and millions of years. So they said, that he actually walked along the bottom of the seafloor. Well, if I can get this thing to work, and I'm probably going to go too far now. This is called a sea ant. They caught one. They've caught several of them now. And somebody told them they caught one. Well, by the time that they could get down to the fish docks to look at it, they had done cut him up pretty good and was playing him and stuff. But they find him now, and they find out, no, he's not walking. He's using fins for what fins should be used for. And that's something when I go speak to kids, I try to impress upon them. Just because they're telling you this stuff does not mean that's how it is. Just because a dinosaur looks a certain way does not mean that's what he looked like. We don't know. We don't see him nowadays. A lot of it comes out of their mind. This is another beneficial mutation they're talking about. There's a village over in Italy, and they said it has a population of about 980, and they said 40 of the villagers have just this extremely high cholesterol, but it doesn't bother them because of the way their body deals with it. And then another case that's kind of interesting. This guy here can run 350 miles without stopping and does not have any problems with cramps or anything else. And it said with the way his body works, the lactic acid and stuff just clears right out of the muscles. I don't think this is a mutation. I think how God made us, and we have a few people that still have that left. I know a lot of creationists have theorized that with the environment we had before the flood, a man could have run up to 200 miles a day. Now you got to remember the people were a lot taller, so they had a larger stride. But how long does it take to run a marathon? 4 hours? Okay, and that's 23 miles? A full. So, I mean, if somebody that would have twice the stride of somebody today could possibly run that far in a day. You know, if you had more oxygen and everything getting to your body, you didn't have to worry about lactic acid. You might have to stop for some food and stuff along it along. But I would love to know what a world and a body like that felt like. Maybe one day we'll all get to know. But it's interesting that we still have people like that. As far as the DNA, like I say, every generation we lose part of it. And they say that we have 60 mutations for every generation. So if you look at the evolutionary timeline, that would give us 120 generations. That would be 7,200,000 mutations. We're dead. We would have been long dead. We can't survive like that. Even if you did have a few beneficial mutations, you have too many harmful ones. It would kill you. But if you look at 200 generations, which we believe we have going by a Bible timeline, you're around 12,000 mutations. We're pretty much about where we're at now. We're starting to get diseases. Our bodies isn't working right, but we're not to the point of dying yet. But we're getting there. We're waiting for the Lord to come back and reset it all and get it like it goes, and get it where we don't have the mutations anymore. Bouncing to something different, just talking about the timeline. I'm sure y'all have heard of carbon-14, and you have a lot of other methods of radio dating, or radiometric dating, where they measure the radioactive materials. Well, rocks and stuff, they don't measure with carbon-14, because after so long the carbon-14 is not there anymore, and they know the rocks are older than that, so they use something different. Well, recently people have started measuring for carbon-14. We have carbon-14 in diamonds. We have carbon-14 in oil and other things like that are supposed to be a lot older. So we know that can't happen. We find it in a lot of the rocks, we're finding carbon-14 values of around 4,000 years, which makes sense if we believe in a worldwide flood about 4,500 years ago. So, like I say, kind of a quick explanation of why it can't last that long. You can see by about 28,000 years, there's only 3% of the carbon-14 left in anything because it decays. It slowly rots away, or however you want to put it. But I think they said by 50,000 years or so, it's not detectable anymore. So if somebody tells you that carbon-14 dated a fossil and it's, 2 or 3 million years old, it doesn't work. But we're getting carbon-14 in fossils, which means they can't be that old. So it's really interesting to look at some of this stuff. Let's see. They're finding actually markers from DNA in some of the dinosaur bones and stuff. That can't survive long. They're finding soft tissues in the dinosaur bones. They're actually starting to find nerve endings and other things in the dinosaur bones. That can't last but a couple of thousand years in the best situations, let alone millions. Something that really changes your carbon-14 is we have a lot of volcanic activity. That changes how much carbon-14 is there, because you have more carbon in the atmosphere. So do you think we may have had a lot of volcanic activity during the flood? It really changed things a lot. Now, something else we figured out is you can turn it the other direction, because the few little bombs that we set off around World War II that were nuclear, that messed up the carbon in our atmosphere. carbon-14. And it changed the way things would be dated in that area because you had a difference. But evolution wants to say that it has stayed the same for millions of years instead of thinking about that you have things like this that can happen. I mean, when Yellowstone went off, it threw ash all the way to Louisiana. We've had more supervolcanoes like that. When you have stuff like that, it completely changes the environment, and it changes all this stuff. There it goes. Helium is another byproduct of some of the elements decaying down. Well, if it was millions of years old, we would have a lot more helium than we do now. Just a few of the things. There's not enough sand in the oceans because, as y'all all know, when stuff gets rained on, the continents kind of break down and it turns the rocks to sand and all this stuff, and it slowly washes to the ocean. The ocean would be thick in sand now if it was millions and billions of years old, and there's not a very thick layer there. So everywhere we look, we're seeing it's not real old. I thought this was interesting. This is from a biochemist describing a cell. He said if you take a cell and magnify it 1 billion times until it's about 20 kilometers into the diameter, it would resemble a giant airship large enough to cover a city like London or New York. He said whenever you would look into it, you would see all sorts of like robot-like machinery going around and doing all kind of stuff. And they compare this to a large city because they said all your sanitation, all your utility crews, your taxis, your people living in it and everything is not as complicated as what is going on in a cell in your body at any given time. Some of these small machines, I'm trying to remember, I read it earlier, but they, are only made out of a molecule or two. I'm trying to remember, one of them told how many atoms was in it, and it was not many. But they said, these small things made up of just a couple of atoms are acting like machines going in and taking care of different parts of the cells, hauling off materials, bringing materials in. And I've actually got some videos that I play sometime to where they have kind of simulated what all this looks like. I've got one that's real neat, and I think I played it here one time a couple of years ago, of our DNA being copied and divided. And they said some of the parts in this molecular machine that the Lord made are running as fast as a jet engine spins. And it copies the DNA, and then it has to turn the DNA around and put it back together backwards on one side. And it's steady doing this in our bodies billions and billions of times and not making mistakes hardly at all. I wish we could make machines like that nowadays. I think our stuff's getting worse and breaking down more. It doesn't hold together like it used to. Jump to something different. Miss White says that sin above all other, which called for the race to be destroyed in the flood, was amalgamation. Which basically means before the flood, man started playing with genetic stuff on. She says man and beast. We're starting to do that now. So I wouldn't doubt if it's getting pretty close to the Lord's ready to wind us down. And one of the things she talks about is, part of the reason was because they were trying to play God, but the other part of the reason is they were getting ready to destroy themselves. Because as we saw with COVID and a few of the other diseases we've had, if you mess up with a virus or something, it can take out a large part of the population. And we start playing with some of this stuff, we may do some bad things. And God knows that. But something that was interesting to me, if you read in chapter 7 of Patriarchs and Prophets, she says, since the flood, there's been amalgamation of man and beast, as may be seen in almost every endless variety of the species of animals. Now, amalgamation does not always mean us doing genetic stuff like you would do in a hospital. It could just be the breeding and stuff. And we have had that. But not saying there couldn't have been some of that stuff afterwards. Lucinda Hill, which is a doctor up at Southern Adventist University, has proposed that Neanderthal could have been genetic engineering that happened after the flood because of the way his body is made. Not that it's that crazy, because you're getting more and more paleontologists and stuff saying that he was fully human. One of the quotes of him, and this is not from a creationist, this is secular, says, his aspect would be of a robust, short man with short arms and short legs, stocky and wide chest, and a ridge bone above the eyes, which gives him a primitive look. In fact, his overall physical appearance may be similar to an Eskimo or some other modern population. Now, as far as the ridge above the brow, that happens a lot of times just on how you use your jaw. If you look at the Aborigines and things like that, because they have used their jaw like a vice and stuff or a tool so much, whenever you press hard, it thickens these bones here and this one up here. And sometimes they've kind of theorized from some of the things they've read stuff that back years ago when people lived to be longer, that you would get a natural build up there too. So these could have just been people that were a lot older. And once again, I go back to what I tell the kids. How do we know they look like that? We're looking at everything from a skull, and we're trying to put features of what we think that they look like. And it's hard to tell that from bones. Something I've always thought was funny is that they measure the intelligence of something by the brain capacity. He had a lot more brain capacity than we got, but they say, but it was not the right type, so he was not as intelligent as we are. It's something that we always tell ourselves we're the most intelligent things out there. And I think there were people before us a lot more intelligent. But these are just some of the other things. I know y'all probably all heard of Lucy, that they said was a missing link. That ended up being a chimp. Nebraska man, I want to think that might have been the one they used in the Scopes trial that helped get evolution into the school. They just had a tooth. And they said that tooth was from the missing link. Well, a couple of years they went and found the rest of the body. It turned out to be a pig. But do they go back and change the stuff that they argued in the court trial? No, because they got what they wanted. And you would be amazed how many jaws and different things like that they have actually found have been forged. Or they'll find parts miles and miles apart, and they'll all put them together and say they came from the same body. And you get so much of that stuff, it's crazy. They said really Neanderthal, they found out, was just a skeleton of a really old person that suffered with a lot of arthritis. We have a lot of different things that goes on with our bodies. Talking about the amalgamation and the breeding, I kind of agree with this. How could a majestic creature like the wolf be turned into a chihuahua? But that's what happened, because it's a good chance the dogs that were on Noah's Ark were more of a wolf. And we see tons of breeds that we have bred. Problem is as most of y'all know, when you have a purebred dog that has been bred a lot, he has a ton of health problems. And a Chihuahua has a bunch. We had Boston Terriers, they have a bunch. But if you go get a mutt, he usually doesn't have hardly any trouble and about live forever. So you're losing genetic stuff whenever we're selectively breeding this stuff, trying to get things out of it. And they'll do that with cows and everything else. Well, they'll make some things better, but you have worse things. And we're doing it with our food too. We're making it where it might be better for the pests not bothering it, but we're losing nutrition and stuff at the same time. I think the more we can leave stuff like God left it, even though sin's taking control of it, we're not helping sin along by, losing the information. Something that was interesting is they found out by studying the dolphin and the way he does his echolocation, sonar, whatever you want to call it, that he can detect a fish the size of a golf ball 230 foot away. And they said it took somebody it was an expert in chaos theory to show that the click patterns are mathematically designed to give the best information he could get. And you can say this all happened by trial and error and chance, but why does everything that we see like this show that there was design and it's just perfect for what it needs to be? Why is this not half working? Because it's kind of evolved into something. Why is it evolved where it's perfect on just about everything? And we see that. The bees, they've done some more studies on them and found out as he's going and hunting for flowers or nectar or things like that, he might find a flower here, he'll find one here, he'll find one here, he'll find one here. Well, he'll take that back to the hive once he's full, but when he comes back, he does not go the same pattern, because with his mind the size of a grass seed, he can calculate the most efficient pattern to go back to those flowers better than any computer we got today. And he does a little dance in front of the hives and tells that to all the rest of the bees so they know exactly what to do. Something that we would figure is just some kind of stupid little thing that doesn't even have a brain is doing things far beyond what our computers and stuff can do today, because he does it split second. So I thought this was neat. It's kind of thrown in there, but evolutionists has always said that grass evolved long after the dinosaurs, so they couldn't have ate grass. But they found dinosaurs with grass in their stomach. Well, birds evolved from dinosaurs. Y'all all hear that? They found some dinosaurs with birds in their stomach where they ate them. And some of the other mammals that supposedly evolved long after the dinosaurs, they found them in the stomach of the dinosaurs too. So, like I say, we can't believe all this stuff we read. If it doesn't agree with the Bible or Miss White, I don't think it's something that we need to put a whole lot of stock in. It's interesting to read, and you'll find a lot of factual information, but we need to guard what we read, and we need to, we need to let our kids understand that, like they're trying to say the Bible's fairy tale, we need to let the kids understand a lot of this is fairy tale, because they're sensationalize it, trying to get people interested in it. This is from some more of the secular scientists. They're saying that because of the pure mathematical laws and stuff that we're seeing, they say that doesn't happen by chance. It says the universe begins to look more and more like a great thought instead of this machine. Because they're saying that with the thoughts and the laws and everything else we see working, it couldn't have happened by chance. So the big problem for evolutionists and atheists is that the evolution can't do math. It is just based on different variations and mutations, not making it just right. So, there's a cosmologist that said there are precise values needed to establish and sustain the universe capable for producing life. And they're seeing that, where it really shouldn't be. It should be more random. And then another one said, after looking at 30 different laws of constants and physics and stuff that govern the universe, are saying it looks like someone spent a lot of time turning all these laws so they work in unison. And I think God did that. And we look down and it says in Jeremiah, it states, "But I, the Lord, have covenant with day and night, and have made the laws that control the earth and sky." And I don't think we would be here without somebody that wound this clock up and is keeping it going. I know they said that there was I can't remember, he was a famous cosmologist or physicist, and he said, there are two things. He said, there is a God, and he said that's scary, because if there is a God, then that means we have to pay and answer to him. He said, if there's not a God, then that's scary too, because the whole universe is going around at random with nobody watching over it and keeping it in control. I believe we have somebody keeping it in control with everything that's went on. And if y'all have kept up with any of this stuff from James Webb, and this is a little bit old, said to date, they were really thinking that whenever they looked out as far as they were going to be with the James Webb, they were going to see these galaxies that were just tiny and slowly forming and stuff like that, because they thought they were seeing out of the Big Bang where it was first created. They are finding galaxies that look like they're probably as old, if not older, than ours. And that's making them change everything and completely messing up all their Big Bang theories and stuff. Now they're scrambling real hard trying to figure out why They actually, within the last couple of months, have decided that the universe is twice as old as they said it was. And it looks like they're seeing things beyond what they thought they were going to be able to see the edge of the universe. Every time we get a nicer telescope, we find out that we don't know what we thought we did. They have taken the Hubble and they'll point it to a piece of sky that nothing's there, and they'll let it sit. And after a couple of days, they'll look at the picture, and hundreds of thousands of galaxies sometimes. And I probably told y'all this before. Right now, without what the James Webb's even finding, which it's totally changed everything, right now they're saying there are more stars that we know of in the universe than there are grains of sand on Earth. A lot more. And I like to impress that upon the kids and the adults. We are less than a speck of dust in the universe. Not even close. Miss White talks about the other worlds that God made. How many are out there? We don't have a clue. And to think that he wasted his time to come down here and mess with us and is still doing it. We ought to really feel privileged. We ought to feel loved. And as a father, we need to remember we need to have that with our children too. You know, the prodigal son is a good story because we are that. And God's wasting his time on us. And even with the sinful world that we live in, and even after the flood, look at the beauty that God gives us. You know, you go look at all this stuff and you marvel. This is not what the mountains were supposed to be like. But look at how beautiful it is still. God's so gracious to us. He's made such beautiful things for us to be able to see. And even though we're living in a sinful world, he's trying to make it good for us. And I really enjoy going and studying nature. Amy can tell you, I don't care a lot for cities. Whenever we travel, I like to go out and see things because it brings me closer to God, to me, whenever we're out in nature. I don't think we were made to be in big cities. I think we're closer to God whenever we're out in his creation. So that's, just kind of part of what I do whenever we travel. And I like to just, like I say, I want for people when I'm done, especially I've got another one where I talk about the stars in the universe and how big it is. I want us to feel like we are a speck of dust. In some ways, I want us to feel that we're not deserving of the love that God gives us, because I really don't think we are. We need to realize what a blessing it is that he cares for us so much. And we need to in turn do the same thing. God and Jesus is our role model. And, to me, creation is the best place in the world to learn about God. The Bible's great, but nature was the first book that Adam and Eve had to study. And with the help of the Bible and even Miss White and nature, we can be very close to God. Let's have a quick prayer, and then we'll sing our closing song. Dear Father, thank you for being with us through this day. Thank you for being our Father and allowing us to be your children. We thank you for the love, the patience, and the kindness that you've given us. Thank you for being there for us, Father, when we needed you the most. And bless us and be with us through this week, Father. In your name, amen. Okay, our closing song is I Sing the Mighty Power of God, number 88.